Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Anne Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals. It's episode 8 of season 6. In this episode, we dive into two great features of Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Security Explorer and Attack Paths. Join us as we unpack how these tools leverage the cloud security graph to help you hunt down risks, map potential attack routes, and prioritize your cloud security efforts. We've noticed that a large number of you aren't subscribed. If you do enjoy our episode, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show. It's a really great episode, so let's get started. Hey Alan, how are you this week?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Very good, thank you. Anything new? Anything exciting happen this week in your universe?
I was hosting a webinar with Microsoft this week around Entra Suite, mainly Global Secure Access. So that was quite good.
Nice. Is it just you chanting "bye, bye, bye" over and over again?
Not quite. No, no, it was collaboratively done with John from Microsoft around the Entra Suite. So yeah, it was talking about the product stuff like that, but also it was talking about how you can do some of it with your E3 licensing and get some of that benefit as well. So it was good.
Yeah, and I just the thing is, right? You know, when you're in like the Microsoft ecosystem day to day, we just, and I'm not being big headed, but we just know these things, don't we? Right? I'm not saying I know a lot about a lot, but you know, like that. You know, there is E3 capability there, right? I do think a lot of end customers of Microsoft don't actually understand what they've got sometimes, and just highlighting it to them is really valuable. It's not necessarily, and I joked about the buy, you know, Intune. Entra Suite. Wrong suite. That's where my brain's been this week. But Entra Suite like upsell, right? There is, you know, there is a value in and around those technologies, even with potentially what you've got today. So I think a lot of companies do waste, you know, what they don't know what they have. Does that make sense? They haven't used what they've already got.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of unknown because, you know, technology, the Microsoft Suite, you know, the products all add capability, and sometimes it's just missed. You know, not unless it's a you know, Copilot add-on kind of thing that, you know, is mainstream sort of, you know, Microsoft, you know, updates, things like that. Some things are missed or not, like you said, not realised that actually some of it is part of your current licensing. So yeah, it's optimization of license use and things like that, isn't it? Getting the most out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, definitely.
Cool. What about you? How's your week been? Anything exciting happen?
The most exciting thing I think happened this week is I saw a post on LinkedIn about them adding, was it a user list to the Defender portal? Did you see that?
Yeah, updating it to be improving the user list in effect. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't know. I saw that and I just thought, are there multiple or is it just one? But then I did jump into it. It as I scrolled through, I was like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, apart from that, I haven't really been. Yeah, what have I been doing this week? I've been doing a lot of AZ 500 this week. To be totally honest with you, after we finish recording this, I've got to go and finish my current lab because I've got like AKS running on my dev tenant, and I need to make sure that those virtual machine scale sets either get shut down or nuked overnight. So yeah, so I'm doing that.
You've just reminded me that I need to go and check see if I've got Security Copilot still running. Because I was in a demo today with a customer and it came up like, oh, this is what you can do in Defender XDR with Security Copilot. I'm like, oh, that's still running. Yeah, BRB.
And it's funny because I've been doing like loads of like practice exams, question banks, content, YouTube videos, etc. And I saw somebody had linked on Reddit. There's like, I think it's either 8 or 10 or something labs for AZ500. So I'm working through those, and I'm on like the fourth one or something like that, which is now Azure Kubernetes service. And at the top of each lab, it's like, we're going to create a resource group for this lab, and the last action is going to be for you to nuke that resource group, basically. So, and I got distracted by some other stuff today, so I only got halfway through the one that I'm on. So, I have to remember to go nuke it. But it's just, AZ500 is just, it's a lot of everything in Azure, isn't it? It's like kind
Yeah.
of, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's kind of all over the place, isn't it? So
Uh,
for
yeah.
good reason, I suppose. But it's just like so many different disciplines, isn't it? It's
Yeah, and you've got to know all technology, haven't you? That's in Azure as well. It's not just you can't just look at security in the portal kind of thing. It's security against the work, the
actual workloads
SaaS,
and
the PaaS
100%.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like the networking part is just not my universe. You know what I mean? So it's like some of the examples are like, these two VNets appeared and you need to route X to Y, etc. And I'm like, I know these bits, but like, if I was in the portal, I'd be able to work it out. Do you know what I mean? But like, but no, I scored really high on my my practice exam. So yeah, I'm ready to go. I just making sure I've done as much as I possibly can, basically. So yeah, that's been my sort of big focus this week.
No, that's cool. Okay, what's this week's episode then, Sam? What are we talking about?
So we're going to continue on with the theme of Defender for Cloud, and we're going to look at one specific area of Defender for Cloud, which is multiple things, but it's really around the cloud security graph, security explorer, and attack path analysis as well. Because Defender for Cloud is made up of so many different things, we have talked about these things, but not in any sort of detail. So I think I thought it would be worth to actually run a whole episode on them.
Yeah. Okay. Let's dive in then. So it's probably worth having. I mean, we talk about it again all the time about being I think what I call a portfolio of products. But can you just give us a bit of an intro into what Defender for Cloud is?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's do a real just quick recap, because we do have we do kind of have like a series on Defender for Cloud, really, because it is pretty big. But essentially, Defender for Cloud is split up into two parts. The first part is cloud security posture management, and that is really the idea of making sure, as it describes, that the security posture of the resources that you run and manage in Azure is as secure as they can be. We know from the cloud that there is a shared responsibility model. So when you deploy resources into the cloud, it's not necessarily Microsoft's responsibility to secure your workloads end to end. Okay, there are some things that they are going to manage in certain workloads. So, for instance, if you deploy a PaaS service, then Microsoft is going to take some of the responsibility away from you and say manage the infrastructure and the operating systems that run that PaaS infrastructure. But you will still be responsible for managing, network connectivity, internet exposure, data security, authentication, right? So we do need to, and Azure and all cloud providers are very flexible in what they do allow you to do. It is possible to in 5 minutes to deploy a virtual machine and have it and be able to RDP into that machine via the internet. Right, you may get some warnings in the Azure portal, but it is possible for you to do that, because there are some specific workloads that need internet facing machines. So cloud security posture management looks at each of your resources and very simply says, hey, have you got a good security posture there? Have you followed best practice? Have you followed industry regulation to maximize or minimize your security exposure of your resources? So cloud security posture management is quite a static thing, I would say, right? It's looking at the configuration as it sits in Azure. The other side of it is cloud workload protection. So if you think about we've looked at the posture of, let's call it, the static resources, even though resources aren't static. But workload protections give you real-time threat detection on your workloads. So think, I'll use the example of Azure storage accounts. People are uploading files to Azure storage from your application. You may want to scan those uploads for malware, like you would if you were running, any other sort of storage mechanism. So you can apply these workload protections, and we've got episodes on, I would say, a lot of them now. The majority of the ones that we can really talk to, I would probably say. And you can apply those to your resources, but they are real time in their nature. So CSPM, more static analysis. That's not really fair to say because it's not static, but I want you to think about, how the resources are configured, and then workload protections are real-time threat detections. So all of these different tools can be applied independent of each other. So you can turn on Defender for server, or you can turn on Defender for storage, Defender for Key Vault, whatever those workload protections are, or you could just look at cloud security posture management if that's what you want to do.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like you said, it's a massive sort of portfolio of products, and like you said, we've been doing like a 4, 5, 6 episodes on it. So, but yeah, let's kind of talk around, the cloud security graph. What is it?
Okay, so underpinning the underpinning of Defender for Cloud is what's called the cloud security graph, and what what I'll do is I'll explain the sort of basic premise of it, and then we'll sort of expand out into why it's needed. So, okay, so if you think about all of the resources that you deploy into your cloud environments, if you imagine them on a map, right? So they're like places, towns or cities on a map. So you've got, a function app over here. You've got a virtual machine over there. You've got a network security group, a VNet here. And now you've got all of these sort of towns or little islands on your map, right? And ultimately, these resources are processing and flowing data from one place to another. So, you might be flowing data from a user on the internet connecting to your public IP, and then that going through your web servers to a backend, right? So all of these islands or these resources are connected to each other in some way. Okay. Some are standalone, but a lot of them are intrinsically linked to each other. So I'll use that example that I did. You might have a web server that your users access. I don't know. Let's say you've got a blog on your web server. Do people make blogs anymore? Who knows, right? But anyway, you've got a blog on a web server. And then so the user, in a very simple model, will access your blog or your website on your web server. And that web server might be serving traffic from your database, as an example. So that's a very simple, let's call that a very simple path, where you've got a user accessing a web server that accesses a database. Okay, now what we in order for us what we when we're thinking about security, we talk about attack paths or kill chains. Okay, so we think about attacks and security in these paths. So what we want to do is we want to look at a specific scenario, so the sort of steps that I outlined, and we want to understand what is in place in that path, that's going on there. And we want to understand, firstly, how the data flows and how things communicate on that path. And we also need to think about the criticality as well of those resources on that path. Okay. Because we need to understand the context of what is there. It's not just good enough to say, hey, um, on your what's a good example of this? On your firewall, you need to have these ports open, as an example, right? It's not a very good example, but I'll use that as my example. It's not, without context of what that firewall is doing or that web server is doing, communicating the threat to non-technical stakeholders is very challenging. Okay, so every change that you make in your environment comes with an element of risk and comes with an element of cost. Okay, because somebody that is, paid for what they do has to make that change. Okay, so you need to think about the priority of how you work through your environment and to make it more secure, because you can't do everything at once. So this cloud security graph is designed to essentially map all of these different resources, cloud assets, and create an inventory. Okay. Then it maps all of the connections between that inventory. It then tries to understand how lateral movement can take place between those that inventory. So how could somebody, if asset X was breached, where could lateral movement, how could an attacker move through the rest of the system at that point? It wants to try and understand whether something is internet exposed or not. And we'll talk about this in a bit more depth, because internet exposure is, that is right at the edge of your cloud security graph. So want to know if something is accessible via the internet, because that is sometimes harder said than done in, or understood in, Azure, right? Because you can make some very minor changes to a resource and it can become in and out of internet exposed relatively quickly. We need to understand permissions. So what identities have access to what, and what permissions they have over those identities, those assets. Do all of your admins run around with full owner privileges all the time? If they were breached, what could they access? So you're not just thinking about, from that public attack perspective. What if we got an insider risk? What if one of our, what do they call them? Super admins, don't they? What if one of our super identities, gets breached? What could happen then? Because we're thinking about all of those layers and all of those, we call it defense in depth. We're thinking about all of the different scenarios that could happen anywhere through these paths, and vulnerabilities on specific assets. If you've got a virtual machine that hasn't been patched for a long time, if a threat actor managed to breach an identity that had administrative access or access to a virtual machine that had a vulnerability on it that could be exploited, that could be a potential area for vulnerability. So, long story short, the cloud security graph is building that inventory and all of the relationships and contexts that you really need to actually start to prioritize risk in your environment.
Okay, does sound pretty important to be able to do that. Like you said, being able to do it yourself would be difficult to even start with, I guess, because the amount of time you might need to to even try and work out that mapping of what's used with what, or how communication flows as well.
Yeah, well, you've already done it once, right? To configure it. Yeah, in like you've built it in Azure, but this is flexible enough that it can understand your environment without you telling it, sorry, what your environment is a second time. Right, it's looking at what you've created in Azure and and mapping it out for you.
Yeah, and I guess as well, it's keeping your current state of it as well, without you having to tell it that you've made a change, here and there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so what is the Security Explorer then?
Okay, so now that we've got this data, um, and I will talk about how this is used, in I say in Defender for Cloud because what I'm going to talk about is in Defender for Cloud, but I mean in terms of what the product is going to give you. But what Microsoft do is they expose this cloud security graph to you, firstly via you can get access to it via an API if you want to query it and use the raw data and the telemetry that's there under the hood. But they have built what's called the Cloud Security Explorer. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to create queries against your cloud security graph to identify specific patterns of vulnerability, as an example. So I'll give you an example. There's like a graphical user interface. It's like a query interface that you can use. So you can say things like, right, what would you like to search for? I'd like to see all my virtual machines that are exposed to the internet. So like, my edge web servers, etc. That have vulnerabilities on them. If I've got a product on there that's showing me the vulnerabilities, and that is integrated into Defender for Cloud, where the severity is maybe high or critical. Show me, vulnerabilities that are actually of concern to me. And then you can add, other types of filters on there, so that can be accessed by, say, managed identities or this specific list of identities or roles. And then you can run that. You can run that query in the interface, and it will give you a list of results. So it is essentially a glorified query interface, but it does allow you to build your own custom searches across that without having to go into a graph situation or a KQL situation. You can also, once you've run it, you can save it as a query template, so you can keep rerunning it, and you can also download a CSV of the results as well from the interface. So you have the ability to, and you can also share a quick link to that query as well, like with your sort of teammates as well. But what's really cool about the Cloud Security Explorer is it comes already predefined with a bunch of query templates, and I'll talk through some of those, with you. So I'll give you an example: specific VMs that are vulnerable to one specific vulnerability. So imagine if you had let's say a popular vulnerability. We always use the example of like the Log4j vulnerability, but there are many every year. If you have a request from, say, your senior management to say, "Hey, I just saw on LinkedIn that Log4j is really bad. Are we vulnerable to that?" It can, you can relatively quickly build a query to go and look at specific vulnerabilities, as long as you've got the data there, obviously. What user accounts have access to vulnerable virtual machines in our environment? Are there any SQL servers that are tagged with a specific tag, like a production tag, or in a specific, resource group maybe, that are currently internet exposed. You may have somebody may have gone in and made an accidental change to a SQL server, which has meant that it's become publicly available. So there are loads of different things that you can do. Key vault keys and secrets without an expiration period. There's lots of different query templates that you can use. The other one part that I wanted to just highlight as well is this cloud security graph goes beyond just Azure. So if you are integrated with, say, AWS or GCP, it will build this cloud security graph in those cloud environments as well. So if you are multi-cloud, you don't have to run a query for just your machines in Azure. You can search across multiple of them as well.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess it's going to help with, like, from your example of machines exposed to the internet with vulnerability, critical vulnerabilities like Log4j, etc. I guess that would help with prioritization of your remediation. In that, if you had machines that weren't exposed to the internet, maybe back end, yes, they're still at risk, but obviously the internet exposed ones are more critical because they're, as it is, exposed to the internet in some way, running that main service, etc. So I guess it gives you that ability to be able to quickly identify which ones you need to tackle first from that side.
Yeah, exactly. And in cloud security is all about prioritization, risk management, risk reduction, and prioritization of essentially resource. Because especially in large cloud environments, teams are often overwhelmed by lists of stuff they should or shouldn't do. But actually having a place where they can see some of this in real time in front of them is really important.
Yeah. Okay. So what, I guess with some of this information, understanding how everything sort of connects together, I guess this kind of ties into sort of my next question around sort of attack paths. And kind of from the sound of it, it kind of hints what it might be. But could you go into a bit more detail about what they are?
Okay, yeah. So as I sort of very briefly went over, because you could do a whole podcast episode on attack path disruption, but essentially, if you boil if you look at security through one lens, or cloud security through one lens, you can look at it through attack path analysis. What can hop to what in what order, and how you could disrupt an attacker should they try to utilize an attack path. If they're able to identify an attack path and actually utilize it. So another part of Defender for Cloud is the identification of potential attack paths automatically. So the Defender for Cloud has an algorithm that it uses to locate potential attack paths, but it's using the data from your graph and your actual multi-cloud environment to do that. So this isn't just generic information; it's actually using your assets and communication and connections to actually verify it. And what this does is it is an algorithm. I don't know if anybody but Microsoft knows under the hood how it works, but it essentially looks at the context and the risk of each of the assets and chains them together about whether a potential attack could occur. So this doesn't have to be connected to the internet. Okay, an attack path can be as small as this super identity is breached that's got a lot of privileged roles, and they can access this highly vulnerable private virtual machine. It could be as small as that, or it could be, request comes in from the internet through a web server that's got an unpatched vulnerability and open ports to the internet, as an example. Now, what's good about this process is that it happens automatically for you. This algorithm runs and it will detect a number of attack paths in your environment. So if you have this enabled and you go to the blade in the portal and there's nothing there, then good news, you've got no attack paths there that you have to deal with. So you'll see a list of attack paths. Microsoft will, or I should say, Defender for Cloud. Anyway, Defender for Cloud will give you a risk level for each of those attack paths. It will show you the entry point and the target, the end target asset as part of that attack path. And then when you click into one, you'll see sort of a rich information. You'll see a rich sort of diagram and detail about what it's identified, and it will draw out the attack path in the user interface, and it will show you all of the resources that are a part of that attack path. Okay, and then you see this enriched information as well. So it'll say something like this. I'll give you an example. This virtual machine has got a high risk vulnerability, and it also has a plain text. Let's say it's got a plain text SQL Server connection string in a temporary file on the box. Okay, so if an attacker was to breach, say, Alan's account, Alan's got access to the vulnerable machine, Alan's got access to the vulnerable machine, and also that machine has unencrypted secrets on it, as an example, or vulnerable secrets on the device. Now, you could make my crude example there. You could argue whether how the priority of that is, because there's a few things that would have to happen in order for that attack to become successful. But the way that we we want to know about these things, because there's a few things going on there. There's should our super identities actually have the permanent privileged access that they do? That's the first question to ask. Sorry, Alan, I'll use your name. Should Alan be rocking around with global admin and owner to everything 24/7? Probably not. The second part is should we be patching our virtual machines? Do we have a good vulnerability management process in place? And then the third thing is should we be storing credentials in plain text, even if they are in temporary files? Because we know that attackers have tools to identify this type of content. So even though you see that attack path end to end and it's showing you that example, it can really give you some really good ideas about okay, where should we focus? Because then you might look at any one of those things, because you might say, okay, actually, you know what, our we need to get some privileged identity management to give us just-in-time access to privileged roles. That might be easier to, as a first initial thing, because maybe we need to buy a license for all our admins and get PIM set up. It can start to hint to you the types of defects that you have in your security strategy. And what it will also do is it will show you recommendations. Okay, so it'll give you this information, and then it will show how you. So first of all, it will give you recommendations about what you should do. So it will say like, if there's a storage account that's got public access in it and it's in the attack path, it'll say, hey, we think you should disable public access to that storage account. And then somebody might go, well, we need it public because of X, Y, and Z, or oh, we didn't realize that one was public, so let's remediate that. But there are also built-in remediations as well. So like you can with recommendations in Defender for Cloud, there are quick fix options in the portal to make those changes. So it's going to show you what it thinks it's finding end to end. It's going to highlight the risks in that attack path, and it's going to give you recommendations and potential remediations for you, sort of on a plate. This is automatic. You don't have to do anything. Now, the only one thing I will caveat about this is it doesn't understand things that aren't in Azure or in Defender for Cloud. Okay, so if you do have other services in play, like maybe you use Cloudflare in front of everything, maybe you use that as your web application firewall, right? Just know that it will require a human to go through some of these attack paths, because sometimes they're not always 100% because they don't have all the information in front of them, if that makes sense. And they also don't know what budgets and restraints you have about the types of resources you deploy, but it can help you to highlight the risks that you have and to help you make justification as to why you should get them fixed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Definitely sounds one interesting. Like you said, with along that attack path, maybe you can only fix part of it, and maybe just stop it getting to the sensitive data. As an example, is by changing permissions, things like that initially, and then working towards vulnerabilities, things like that. So yeah, I guess as well, it's probably worth mentioning, isn't it, Sam, that these attack paths can now feed into the exposure management as well, to sort of show you all the attack paths across, I think, all the other stuff like Defender for Identity as well, bringing it all into one place now.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, if you that's really where our centralized view of posture management is really feeding. So yeah, it's a really good call out that they're not just here; they are integrated, into other places as well.
Yeah, cool. Okay, how do we get started with all of this stuff then? Because once some of it's configured, I guess how do we
Okay,
how do
well,
we get started?
it's essentially as simple as enabling Defender for Cloud CSPM. So it's you need to have your environments connected that you want to obviously graph and explore and attack path analyze. You will need the Defender CSPM SKU. So it's not part of foundational CSPM. So a security explorer attack path analysis, you're not going to get access to that information without you do get the asset inventory as part of foundational CSPM, but yeah, you're going to have to jump up to Defender CSPM to get started with it.
Yeah, okay. Well, that seems relatively, well, it's simple. There's no word around it. It's the flick of a switch, in effect.
Yeah, the only thing,
that data.
yeah, the only thing I will say is, in order to feed the maximum amount of data to it, you will need to think about things like agentless scanning being enabled to give you like the most visibility possible. And there are things for in and around Defender for containers. So enabling agentless container posture, the container posture extension. Sorry, I couldn't quite get those words out. In Defender CSPM, you're also going to need the roles: security reader, security admin, reader, contributor, owner, etc. So yeah, do jump in, because for some of the types of assets that you might be wanting to map, you may need additional information there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else on that bit, but yeah, without being able to do the agentless scanning, things like that, you can't get the vulnerability information in effect, not unless you've got Defender in effect on those endpoints anyway.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, okay. I guess the question that definitely follows that on enabling Defender CSPM, how much does it cost?
Yeah, I think didn't you did an episode on Defender CSPM, didn't you?
Some time ago, yeah.
Did you not do one? No, you didn't do one recently. You did Defender for Server, didn't
Server,
you?
yeah,
Yeah, okay, sorry. So yeah, so there's a free foundational CSPM, so that's not really applicable. Here you are going to have to bump up. And um, Defender for Cloud Security Posture Management, or Defender CSPM, I should say, is, well, in dollar pricing per month, $5.11 per billable resource per month. And what is a billable resource, Alan? It is
compute, data storage, and something else.
Oh,
You're making me think I did do one on this now.
I think you did. I'm sure you
Yes,
went
I did.
through.
It's episode 3 of this season.
Yeah, right, cool. I'm not going crazy. I just wanted to get the actual billable resources. Sorry, I'm going to look it up because it is worth.
Yeah, because I was talking about resources like API Manager, one APIs and things like that. They're not included as a billable resource.
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
can for certain workloads. You could essentially apply it for free, couldn't you?
It's compute, storage, and DBs. So storage accounts, virtual machines,
Fine. Yeah.
SQL DBs, and similar thing for the AWS and GCP.
Yeah, because weren't we saying something like if you just all you ran was like key vaults in Azure,
Yeah.
then you wouldn't have to pay. If
Correct.
You just...
or loads of API managers, yeah, things like that.
Yeah. So if you do have some of those key resource types and asset types in Azure, and also the other clouds as well, you are going to have to pay for that Defender CSPM license to activate it.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else, Sam?
No, I think that's it from me. I just what I really like about this tooling is it gives you extra query ability, and it also gives you this automated attack path analysis as well. And I have seen it in the real world work pretty well, right? I have also seen it when you because I once did it for a client where we did a cloud security posture management assessment for them. We always do look at any tooling that they've got enabled and what's in there, and we work with a client to actually validate what we are seeing, because when we're coming in to do these types of assessments, we very rarely know what's gone on in the past, how things are architected, if that makes sense. So but I did have I have had some good hits just from the automated tooling that, would I have found them? Yeah, because we go through all the resources anyway, but was it just displayed to me on a plate like it was in attack path analysis? No, because attack path analysis is doing that for me. So that was a benefit. Did it catch everything? No. Was it 100% accurate? No. But if you know the assets that you have in your environment and how, how generally you have your assets in your environment, because lots of organizations don't, it can be very valuable to you, because you can say, hey, that attack path looks good. I'm going to go and investigate that. And that can only be a good thing, right? And you're not paying for it by itself, right? It's part of Defender CSPM. So, you're going to get loads of other benefit for that $5 a month, So I think it's well, per billable resource. So I think it's worth enabling.
Sounds like a great segue, Sam, into season 6, episode 3, where you can actually dive into all those
Yeah, and if you
CSPM
want
benefits.
to, in a previous episode, which Alan completely forgot about, and I kind of did as well because I was umming and ahhing about whether it was real or not. Alan did a CSPM overview of the 2 SKUs and what you got in each, right?
Correct. This season, episode 3, so it's like 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Cool. Thanks, Alan. What are we doing next week?
Yep, so I'm going to look at kind of a little of a refresher again, but looking at Defender for Cloud Apps, MDA again, but focusing on app governance. So looking at your OAuth applications and some of the insights now that you can get with Defender for Cloud Apps, being able to identify how these applications are being used, what data it's touching, potentially, and being able to maybe automate the disabling them, disrupting them and things like that. So, because it's always difficult to, without using PowerShell and things like that, it might be difficult to see in Entra ID, the app registrations, enterprise apps, and be able to, to go through each application, understand who's got access to it and who's using it as well, can be quite difficult without trawling through logs and everything. This kind of, without giving it away, but kind of helps you, do that, quite quickly in a nice visual, not necessarily dashboarding, but list way in effect. So yeah, it's probably worth going through that because OAuth attacks are still a thing.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that is one of those areas that is quite prevalent, right, and important. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that episode.
Yeah, I think it gets missed as well as part of the Defender for Cloud App sort of solution because, again, not diving into that one sort of too much, but Defender for Cloud Apps has always been seen as, I'm going to say air quotes, just a CASB solution, but it's definitely evolved into more things and greater things.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Yeah, 100%.
Cool. If you did enjoy this episode, please do consider leaving us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. This really helps us reach out to more people like yourselves. If you do have any specific feedback or suggestions for episodes, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep, thanks all.